So one of the other things that I thought was really, really cool about WWDC is Apple's continued focus on accessibility. And it didn't just end with the keynote. We did get a lot of features there, like Siri for Mac. There were some features they didn't talk about, like on the iOS 10, you can now use the camera as a magnifying glass, and you can shift colors if you have different visibility needs. But they also had continuous labs on accessibility across all of the platforms. And on the Wednesday, they had an accessibility meetup, which was remarkable. I mean, a couple months ago, maybe it was just a month ago, Apple had it. They built an entire house inside one infinite loop inside the atrium where people from Apple could come and learn about all the technologies, including Braille keyboards and cochlear implants and Siri and HomeKit and all the different frameworks that they provide. And they did that on a smaller scale at WWDC, where they had an area where the very talented Apple engineer who's blind and who did the DJing at the Apple Design Awards showed you sort of how he did the DJing with the DJ Pro app. And they had cochlear implants you could put on your forehead and sort of feel how the bone conductivity worked. And they had various apps on display. They had the American Sign Language Association app, and they were talking about how that was developed and sort of what you could learn from it. And I got to actually type with a Bluetooth keyboard to a Braille reader for the woman, and I'm going to blank on her name for a second. I just had it up here, and I'll pull it up again, who Haben Girma, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, who is blind and deaf and graduated from Harvard Law. But thanks to this sort of technology, she was not only at WWDC, but she spoke at WWDC. One of the best presentations ever. You just see her typing away, and the presentation goes up, and all of a sudden it's Obama who's talking to her. Totally undersold it. But I find Apple's continued focus on accessibility, not just in the technologies, but giving it actual time on stage and on the floor. I hope that's something that becomes more competitive, because I'm a firm believer that when you make things more accessible in general, you make them more accessible for everybody.
Well, and I think that this is definitely a not just a focus for Apple, but a very, very intense focus from Tim Cook. I mean, I think that this is coming from the top down. And I think that he's just very focused. I think that the more and more I watch, after the years of after Steve Jobs, Steve Jobs got Apple to a certain point, but Tim Cook, I really feel, is just an amazing, next generation leader for Apple, where he's paying attention to all those other little things that make a difference, whether it's accessibility, and a lot of the political stances that Apple, has decided to take one way or the other. But I think that he's very focused on it, and I think that accessibility is becoming a very important piece. And I think that Apple has been very good at being ahead of technology, and what I'm glad to see is that they're also ahead of things like accessibility, and they're setting the pace for everyone. I think that we're going to expect to see closed captioning and subtitling and everything else in the next couple of years.
Described audio.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many parts of this that. These WWDC keynotes are so useful because it's as simple and simple-minded as a statement as this sounds. There is nothing in that keynote that they did not choose to put there. So it's super significant when they choose to spend so much time speaking in detail about accessibility features and people who have how they're going to make their technology accessible to people who have problems with vision and people who have problems with fine motor control and people who have problems with color perception. And it's not only are they talking about it because they feel as though this is as important as almost anything else that they're announcing that day. I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they also acknowledge that this is something that they can be a leader at. And one way of defining leadership is getting there first and having the best solution and killing all the competition. But another aspect of being a leader is inspiring other people and putting their attention on something that you feel that they should be paying attention to. And of course, Apple's not the only company doing that, but I think that they're the company that's flying that flag as highly as they can. I mean, I brought my pick of the week, which I might be burning right now because I have to, because it's something that's relevant. The new Kindle reader has an actual special font selection for people who have dyslexia. So it's to someone who does not have that problem reading. It looks like a very, very weird or stylistic or hippie sort of font, but it actually, the things that tend to confuse the brain that has a problem in actually discriminating letters and forming them into words, it basically gets rid of those hacks that kind of that putties in those cracks in the sidewalk that a dyslexic brain will trip over and makes it easier to create. And when you think about software, it costs a lot of money to develop, but it's not as though you have to buy up all the manufacturing capability of the world to fuse glass to this new kind of metal that you've created. It costs money to develop, but in the end, it's just electrons. It costs nothing in the long run to add an extra font that makes this easier to use for other people. Just like the community that needs, again, interfaces that don't require quite such a precise touch, or that require mono output, or require a lot of help for people with low vision. That's not a huge market. It's also not something they're going to get a lot of grant money for. It's not something they're going to get a big advertising hit for. There's not going to be a telethon in which Tim Cook in a big fluffy tuxedo is singing to a person with a bad low vision and trying to get sympathy for the company. It's just something that they feel is an important thing. And although of course, one of my broken record things about Apple is that I wish that they would make devices that are more accessible to people who don't necessarily have the money to buy a luxury item. But that doesn't mean that they're not focused on trying to make it so that there's a few barriers as possible while they can still be Apple and still pursue their business plan. So bravo to them.